water consumer when I was younger, but as you get older, you really start to appreciate,
Well,
yeah, we need to
absolutely.
drink water.
I have three kids that are the youngest is 17, so I've always pushed water. And kind of a family joke is if you're hurt, my mom always says go drink water. So I'm like, water is the solution. It's actually a start for the solution, in my opinion. If you're tired, if you're hungry, if you're something, go drink some water and then see how you feel after that.
We have that in my family. Whenever somebody says, "I'm not feeling that great," it's always, "Well, did you drink enough water today? Oh,
Exactly.
you have a headache. You should probably drink some more water."
100%. Absolutely.
So, how has the campaign been going?
The campaign has been interesting. It's been a very long process, and I'm excited for it to be over.
That seems to be the general consensus for
Hmm.
anybody that runs is
Yes.
it's a lot. I'm ready for it to be done.
Yes. Well, and technically, I mean, we'll be have been campaigning for a year because we both started in December of last year. So by the time it's over, it'll be a whole year. So it's a long process.
It's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time, a lot of commitment. It's like a second job. Honestly, I work full time at the recorder's office, and then I'm like, okay, after hours, I can do campaigning and weekends and things, and trying to fit it all in is.
Is that the biggest challenge? Is just finding the time for
Well,
it?
luckily, my like I said, my three kids are mostly grown, and I was a very busy mom when they were all in school and with sports and all the things, and so I know how to manipulate my time to make it all work. It's just some people want you to be in two places at once, and I have to be very strict on my schedule. So
So does it switch as soon as you clock out and now you're in campaign mode? Now we got to hit the ground
yes,
running.
yes, yes. Well, or when I go to lunch, like you can't go to the bank after hours. You can't go to do certain. I can't go to the election office because they close from 12 to 1. Luckily, my lunch is at 1. So if I have to do any business with them, it has to be in that on my lunch hour. So I have to fill all that time in and figure all of that out.
That is a crazy grind. And
Yeah.
to do it for a year,
Yes.
is that the standard time for a position
No,
like
I
this?
don't think so. Well, because we're in a runoff, so this is our second bout of it with the general election versus the primary. So,
Hmm.
um, a we're the only campaign in Humboldt that had to do the second because everybody else got yes or no in the primaries. So,
You guys are special.
well, we're
We're
something.
running off.
Yeah, the runoff is interesting. I
Did
had
you anticipate a runoff?
I didn't until the third person popped up. And then I thought, well, it could be what it is. I didn't really understand all of the processes. My background is at the recorder's office and in the document records, so that's why I'm running. And his background is in the election office, and so he knows a lot of those processes. I've had to learn them all, which is also part of the. I mean, I'm reading the election handbook and all of the statutes and regulations because I do that all at the recorder's office all the time. But I certainly didn't know all the election rules and laws. So that's something that I'm trying to pick up, and I've been studying that.
And I would imagine that there are a lot of them.
Yes, yes,
So to play
yes,
catch up is kind of,
yes.
it's a
The
lot.
greatest part is that the Secretary of State is the chief election officer. So that position um, is it's black and white. You know what you're supposed to do. All of the rules and regulations are right there for you. Versus the clerk recorder's office, we don't have that oversight. We are at each county can interpret things the way that they choose to do so. So we really have to know the background and the bare bones of the laws, and then we can interpret things based on that.
One of the interesting things that I found in prepping for this interview with you and prepping for the one with Juan is this recurring theme that there seems to be a lot of emphasis placed on the registrar of voters aspect of the job.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just become in the last 4 to 6 years such a highlight for people. People are becoming more passionate about election, which I think is wonderful. But I also think that our elections in our county have been run very smoothly with no fraud involved and things like that. But you listen to national news and there's all kinds of hoopla for the elections. The clerk recorder's office, you don't hear about us because there's no drama. I mean, we really are. That office, that the things that we handle have been around since the 1850s. Literally, the documents that we handle are that old, over 150 years old. So, and we do them every day. But they're there for prosperity. We have to know what's going to happen with those documents in the future, and we hold on to them. But there's not a lot of drama.
And now because of that national news story of election
Mhm.
fraud and this and that.
Mhm.
Now every election is kind of pulled into the spotlight of that.
100%. Well, and I think the election official in each county needs to be held to a high standard, and I think we have in our county. I believe that that's happened. I think Carolyn and Kelly both have done a good job of doing that. I wasn't old enough to vote prior to Carolyn, so I wasn't sure who was the elected official at that time, and I think that things were set up very differently prior to Carolyn taking over. I think in 2009, 8 or 9, because it was through the state as well.
So do you think that some of that aspect, I guess, of people just paying attention to that role more is a good thing, or do you think it's just that it's a little unnecessary and that we
Um,
are running smooth, we're doing everything we're
no,
supposed
I think
to?
it's great for people to be passionate about elections and have an interest in that and know what their rights are and get everybody involved to vote. I think the more people who vote, the better our society will be. Um, but I also think that on the flip side of that, they create more drama with their opinions and their the media creating falsehoods in false opinions of people for people.
You seem to be attached to that a little bit yourself. I read a couple articles that tie you to being an election denier.
Oh, that's a
What is
completely
what
false.
is the story with
Those are
that?
not
Can you
articles
because
about me. Those
I
are
was
not.
reading that and I was like, why does this keep? Because it comes up a lot, and I
I
didn't
think
really
that's in
understand it.
somebody else's camp. They're trying to aim that towards me, and that's completely false and unjustly accused. I think I'm that. There's no. I wouldn't be running for this position if I didn't believe in the process. I
It'd be
wouldn't.
pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, that would be just ludicrous because I believe in the process and I want to do right by the people, and there's just no clout to that accusation at all. That's ludicrous to me. And honestly, I answered the question the president because a lot of time they've created this illusion of me based on my answer that the president of the United States won the election, and for their interpretation, their purposes, I assume think that could be anybody, but the person who's sitting in the office is the president of the United States at the time the question was asked, and I don't have that mentality that it wasn't real, that the election wasn't real. So I didn't anticipate that question, and apparently I didn't answer it to the likeness of others.
It made sense to me. So for people that don't know, the question was asked of, I believe it was, who won the 2020
Hmm.
presidential election,
Hmm.
and your response was the
The
president. And I
period.
rolled that off as kind of you saying, well, duh, it's the person in the office. But it seemed like it was read into in that you didn't want to respond who the president was.
I just believe that the president of the United States is the person sitting in the office. I don't consider that, and that's not wishy washy for me.
It
So,
seemed pretty direct when
yeah,
I read it. Like, it's the president.
exactly, 100%.
Was that attached to you from the beginning of your campaign? Has that been a more recent development?
It was during the primary that happened, and actually, I had a former coworker slash boss. She was the manager of the escrow department, and I was in the title department. But we worked together on a daily basis. Like I saw her all the time. She actually called me on the phone and asked me about that question, and I said to this person, "You know me. You know that that's not how I react to those things." And she still had questions about that, and so I had to think about outside my box and think about what they're actually asking me and think about what they expect from me. And I'm pretty straightforward. I'm very to the point, honest. You're going to get what you see, and so I had to come up with more verbiage for that, and I answered it on my website as well. And it's just I still get emails probably every week about that question,
Wow.
and I still get accused. So if I say Joseph Biden, I sent me an email and I said answered Joseph Biden was the president, 46th president of the United States, and the person told me that I answered wrong because I didn't say Joe Biden, and I just stopped communicating with that person. It's just ludicrous to me.
It's almost like you can't win at
They're,
this
they're
point.
they've already formed their opinion, and they're just trying to goat me into a conversation or a fight, and I'm not willing to fight about it. It's a fact to me. It's a fact. Period.
It's so crazy the world that we live in now where that is like a selling point.
Hmm.
That's what it's become.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you're getting those emails weekly.
hmm
Is this coming from a lot of people still? Has it died down?
It's I get it asked. I mean, we went to Apple Harvest. People ask me about the same question, and if that's the only thing that you can see not trusting me about, honestly, have a conversation with me. I would love to have a conversation with you. This to me is a fact. This is the president of the United States. I do not deny the election. Period. So,
Well, it's not like your first response to that question was, "Oh, I don't really know. I don't want to talk about it."
or that I didn't. Yeah, I didn't
You said the
deny.
president.
I didn't deny it, and they just read into it.
You think that's a kind of a political hit on you?
Yes, yes. They're trying to bring in politics into an office that is nonpartisan, and to me, that is also wrong. Our job is to remain neutral as the election official in the county, and if you have political ties, then that's harder to do.
Is that why you registered
No
no
party
political
preference.
party?
No
Yeah.
party preference. Absolutely. I was previously registered as a Republican prior to running for the office, and that's mainly because that's what my family was when I first registered when I was 18 years old. So I've always looked at every part of each election and every candidate individually and decided on who I wanted to vote on, where their morals lied with mine.
I wonder if that's where a lot of that stems from, is the fact that you were a one-time Republican. That's
hmm
almost a dirty word nowadays.
I don't know that. Yeah, it's difficult. So my opponent was previously a Democrat, and then he went to no party preference, and then he went back to a Democrat. And so a lot of people are asking me questions about that, and I think that having political ties is wrong in this office.
Do you think that discredits Juan where he went back from no party preference?
For some people, it might. For some people, it might not. It may align with their wishes, so they may vote for him for that purpose, and that probably is why he would have done that.
I think it's hard because Juan had a quote on here that kind of stuck with me. It's the appearance of impropriety is almost worse than the impropriety
100%.
itself.
100%.
And that's hard when you're running for a position especially as you guys have to walk this fine line
Mhm.
of okay, we're right down the middle.
Mhm.
And I think to an extent that comes from a good place,
Mhm.
that wanting to remain impartial. I think
Oh,
we should all want to do that. We should all
absolutely.
vote for the best candidate,
Mhm.
vote for the best person, vote
Mhm.
for the best ideas. And I think that gets lost sometimes as people want to just play those party games of, well, you got to be this or you got to be in this camp. You got to follow these
Right.
lines. You can't
Right.
break out of that.
There's a lot through this whole campaign process. I didn't have any political aspirations. I didn't realize how political this position would get or be, and that was probably me being naive. I didn't want to think about that, and I didn't really going into the campaign, going into choosing to run. I came from a platform of the clerk recorder's office has been pushed to the wayside by the elected official that's currently in office, just because it wasn't her specialty, and her background wasn't in that. It was all in elections. And so a lot of when I worked at the title company, oftentimes we would have questions for her that she couldn't answer. And so she had to take them to a higher power. And I thought, well, that's just not right. And then, or it would take time. And when you're dealing with your first house purchase, or you're getting a loan to build your house, or you're getting trying to close an escrow for any reason, it's very hairy. And there are a lot of parts. And on the last day when you're ready to close and you want to record your documents is not the time when you want something to be stood at a halt. And it's very, very scary for some people. Real estate, and it's not just the people who are buying the house or selling the house or the escrow company. It's their agents, it's their agent's family, it's the moving company, it's the roofer that's going to put on a roof next week. It's all of these people, all of these parts that people don't really think about the big picture. And I come from the big picture, so I have a lot of passion for that position.
Well, you two are unique in that you both come from those different sides.
Mm-hmm.
Juan's got the election side, and
Mm-hmm.
you have the clerking side.
Mm-hmm. It's
It's an interesting split.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I have experience working in his office. His claims of working in our office are very limited. He's helped with some administration stuff because our manager retired earlier this year, and one wasn't chosen to take that position, even though some of us applied. So Kelly needed the assistance of a manager who had the authority to do some of the paperwork for new hires and things like that. And that's his extent.
And that's one of his big pillars, right? Is that
Hmm.
he comes from the
Hmm.
administration side of
Hmm.
things.
And I come from the hardworking blue collar side.
Do you think that gives you an advantage? How do you think that translates into
I
the
think
position?
um, I think both are important. I really, really do. I think administration for each office will be definitely learnable. There are a lot of resources. We work for the county. There are a lot of resources to learn how to do all of those aspects. And I think you need to have a foundation, knowing what you're asking your employees to do every day. I think you need to know what they do and what they go through to help have some compassion for their position, for their job, for the things that they are doing and dealing with. Some of them can be stressful.
I would imagine a lot of it can be stressful, especially, I mean, for the clerking position back when houses were just booming. Everything was selling.
Oh,
You gotta
last
be on the ball.
6 months ago. 6 months ago. I mean, the market has definitely changed. Our whole society has changed in the last 6 months. And for the last 2 years, it was on the boom. It was a pretty big deal. In '08, it was a big deal, and then the crash happened. And so um, there's, I've been here long enough and I understand the ebb and flow of things. Um, so I can help people.
Are you worried about the lack of experience regarding the election side? Or do you
I'm
think you
not.
can learn that?
I'm not worried about that. I watched Carolyn go through it when she got assigned the job. Because in '07 and '08, I was coming up to the recorder's office daily, sometimes twice a day. And Carolyn and I were actually, we called each other neighbors. I lived up the street from her at that time and for a short time. And so um, I watched her stress and I watched her transition, and she came out beautifully and she handled it well. And I know that I can handle that as well.
You feel confident in that?
Very much so. I know there's a lot to learn, but I know that I'm up to the task.
I'd be a little worried if you said you weren't up to the task, right? You almost have to say
You should be
are.
worried.
Yeah,
You
that
should
would
be
be a
worried if
little
I said,
alarming.
I'm really not gonna do it.
One of the things, and I actually made note of this because it kind of caught my eye, is that in reference to kind of the transparency aspect
Hmm.
of the position. Let's see if I can find that here. You said that the recorder's office has had a break in communication with a lot of the public.
Hmm.
What do you think that stems from? Is that just
Because of the lack of timeliness, like I said, with
the process?
the process. If you deliver a document to be recorded and it takes another day, if it takes an hour, you're holding up an escrow, you're holding up transactions, you're holding up an entire process, and so immediate response is required, in my opinion.
How do you plan on fixing that? Is that one of
I've really helped with that. I've been at the recorder's office 3.5 years, and so um, I talked with my manager when we'd have those kinds of issues. She did work from home for most of COVID,
which
and so
probably didn't help?
with communication, yeah, absolutely. So we were the face. The people in the office were the face, and we never closed. We were open. People couldn't come in for a little bit, but then we transitioned into that and handled it very well, I think. Pardon me. But opening lines of communication and being able to actually have a conversation with people when they walk in the door and actually pointing people in the right direction. A lot of people come into the clerk recorder's office thinking that we're court related, and we are not. And so, and that stems from '98 or '99 when they transitioned from the estate office. The courts went to being a state office instead of a county office. And so the county clerk wasn't always it isn't. There are actually 3 clerk positions. So you can be a court reporter clerk, you can be a county clerk, and you can be a clerk recorder. And so there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of people get frustrated. By the time they make it to the 5th floor, they've asked four times where they're supposed to go, and then we have to send them to a different direction in a different way, and they get a little bit frustrated. And so having some compassion and giving them real results and real direction is very necessary. And I guess sometimes give out a phone number. I give them an address if they have to go to a different location. There's a lot of ways to smooth things over with people. And one of my jobs was marketing when I was at the title company. And so I got to be out in the public and answer a lot of questions that a lot of people had about just how their escrow was supposed to work or what happens after escrow happens. And so that's knowledge that I come to this job with that opens those lines of communication for people.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's kind of a maze.
It
Hearing you
is.
talk about that building sounds a
Yes,
little hectic.
it is. It is. Yes, I'm actually. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. I'm actually on a jury right now, so I'm learning about that process. But it all is all court related, and I've never been on a jury before, so it's kind of interesting.
I just got a jury summons.
Mm.
I haven't been on
Don't
one
forget
yet
to
either.
go.
Yeah, it's your civic duty.
Well, and it's I've never ever been sent upstairs before, and so it was kind of interesting to go through the whole process.
And this is your first time being on a jury?
First time ever, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, my son, we all of my kids are adopted, and so he was my young. Well, he's 18 now, but when he was a baby, he had a lot of medical issues, and so growing up, I had to take him to hospitals once a month, and so there was a lot of times that we had to be out of the area. Um, so yeah, jury duty got postponed quite often.
I think that happens for a lot of people. I think that's pretty relatable. Life kind of just gets in the way.
Well, yeah, and your other responsibilities, you can't be. You have appointments, you have to go.
Yeah, and to take time off work. I mean, how many people are just living paycheck to paycheck?
Well, I mean, I work for the county now, so luckily it's part of that job. It's included.
That's nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was reading over where it says their reimbursements is like 63 cents
That's for mileage.
for
isn't it?
gas. Yeah, for mileage. But other than that, I mean, if you
I
need
think
to
you're supposed to
work,
get $15 a day. I don't know.
is that what it is? 15.
And you can
bucks?
waive that. You can waive that.
Wow. Yeah, it's the transparency aspect in all of government is a big factor. Would you be interested? I brought this up to Juan because those two positions are merged. The idea that they're in two separate buildings seems a little ridiculous.
So I think that. Do you know where elections was before they moved?
I do not.
Okay, so have you ever been?
To be fair, I don't even think if you asked me, I would know where the offices are right now.
Okay, perfect.
Streetwise.
Okay, let's give you a little map because that's something in my mind that I like to do. So the planning department. Do you know where that is? Used to be the general hospital up on between. Okay.
Yep.
So election office had a tiny little basement office prior to moving to where they are now, which is over by Harley Davidson. So they're out there, and which is where DHHS is. They have some offices out there, and so it's a very large building. It used to be a mall, back in the day. So they are accessible to the public. They are on a single floor, first floor building, and accessible to the public, which is necessary for people with the disabilities and things like that. Also, they have a lot of security issues that they've actually brought up, and they're getting up to speed. So they're I think they're installing cameras, doing the badges that they can get into the building and things. So it's all monitored, and I think that's very important for their security. For our office, we are located on the 5th floor at the courthouse, which used to be the jail before they built the new jail. So it has a separate elevator to get to it. So you couldn't go out on the elevators from the ground floor and the first floor up to 4, and then you get on a separate elevator, go to 5. So it is complicated to get to. Also, you have to go through security. You have to take off all, take your guns and put them back in your car and things like that. So putting the two offices together would be an amazing idea, but they're facilitated very differently. And I think it's necessary to have them in two different locations. Also, the recorder's office requires. Have you ever been to our office?
I have not.
Okay. So we have a lot of books. Then they're, 10 to 15 pounds each. Also, we have the map books, which are 4 to 6 feet wide, long. And so we need a lot of space, and the public needs access to all of those documents because that is their right. So we need to have them available to everyone to open and things like that. So we have a very large facility upstairs for the public to access. Also, we have a lot in storage behind the scenes. Also, we have all the birth, death, and marriage certificates in books. So that's all those books require a lot of security as well, and a lot of so the birth, death, and marriage certificates have to be behind locked doors, or secured behind for employees only. So moving us would be extremely difficult, and I don't think that it would be right to move the election office up to our office. There's just no space for them, and having the accessibility for the people. We do when we do marriages or people need specific certificates, they can ask us to come downstairs if they can't get out of their vehicle. We did that quite a bit during COVID, where we could come down and check their IDs and things like that. For the access, people don't enjoy coming to our office because they have to go through security and all of those hoops to get there. But it's a big enough space for us.
Logistically, it would be a mess trying to transport everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess a better question for that is, what does the time commitment look like? Because the clerk recorder position seems like it's a year-round full-time
100%.
thing. Is
Absolutely.
that the same for the
Elections office?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of things to do. I think they have 4 to 5 full-time employees year round, and then they have, extra help a lot during the election
Yeah,
seasons.
come in.
So at the recorder's office, it's ebb and flow. Like I said, 6 months ago, things were hopping and things were very busy. And for recording purposes, a lot of transfers of property. And people always need birth, death, and marriage certificates. People are wanting to get married all the time. But mostly the summertime is our busiest time for that. And we perform up to 4 weddings in the office a day, except for Fridays. So sometimes they want to bring in more people. With COVID, we've only been allowed to have them and maybe 1 witness. And so I think things need to change a little bit. I'm sorry, I forgot your question.
It was just the time commitment. For
Oh,
the two
time commitment.
positions.
So the elected official, Kelly, has not been at the clerk recorder's office much since I've been there. And I've been there 3.5 years. I would say 90% of the time she is at the elections office. And I'm not sure if that has a lot to do with how much turnover they've had in the last few years. With COVID, a lot of things were fluid, and we were pretty stable at the clerk recorder's office. We have our manager did retire this year, and we did lose a full-time employee, or a couple of them actually, for personal reasons. So there's been a little bit of turnover at the recorder's office. It does take up to 2 years to train a new recorder, especially if they're coming in green without any experience. So the time commitment that's required for managing both offices, I think it should be split a little bit less than 10% and 90%, or differently. I would try and do 50-50. Certainly during election time, you would need to be there for election purposes, but I enjoy being at the recorder's office also. So
You like it over there.
yes, I do.
Why do you think the predecessor has not split her time? You think it's more so tied to the turnover? I've heard that with the county just in general, is there's a high turnover right now.
Yeah. Before that, I mean, prior years, she didn't split her time evenly either. Prior to COVID, prior to me working there, I would go in there probably 2 or 3 times a month and never see her. So I'm not sure why she chose not to spend a lot of time at the recorder's office. Maybe because she thought it was handled properly and didn't need her oversight. Also, technology has changed a lot of things. I mean, we've done Zoom meetings with her at the elections office and us, and phone and email work pretty well. But like I said, I think face-to-face communication is important, and having your face be where the public can see it is important as an elected official.
So what made you decide to run?
My plan was always to run eventually. I didn't expect Kelly to not run this time. I expected to have 4 more years to prepare. I wasn't quite. I wanted more experience in the elections office and more time to expand all of my knowledge there. But I had always, when I left the title company, that was my plan.
Oh, even back then?
Well, I left the title company 3.5 years ago.
3.5 years. So when you entered the position, you were pretty much preparing.
My goal was to become the elected official.
Mm-hmm.
Not take it away from her, just take it, to become the elected official. So when she chose not to be.
Why is that?
Because I feel like the real estate business and the companies, the real estate professionals, surveyors, things like that, they lacked communication with her. And I wanted to open up those communication lines. In marketing, I got to talk to all of them, and we'd had lots of conversations about her attendance at the recorder's office.
Had you noticed that there was some sort of void in regard to that when you were working for the title company?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
You could feel it even there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, because I would have questions, or we've had to have a dispute. A manager would try and contact her and couldn't get to her. And like I said, things are very timely with escrows and things. So it was definitely a void, missing communication.
Is that part of the reason why you switched from the title company?
we were employee owned. Humboldt Land Title Company was employee owned the entire time that I worked there until the last 6 months, and we sold our board and our employees chose to sell our assets to a corporation. And me being the marketer, it was really difficult for me to market a corporation. I liked being able to market that we were employee owned, that we were from the ground up, and very dedicated. And I didn't like the morals of the corporation. And they were all about the bottom line, and I was about the people.
Why did they? I hadn't heard that. Why did they want to switch?
Our president had been there 67 years, and she was ready to retire. Our controller also retired. Our vice president retired. Our chief escrow officer retired. So it was a time, an age thing, and time for them to leave it to the rest of us, and we weren't cultivated in a way that we could take over being employee owned, and them all leave at the same time.
There was no transitional phase for that.
That was not part of the plan. And employee owned companies last mostly up 10 to 15 years. So that transition often does happen to become a corporation or engulfed in something else.
I'd be interested to see what plays out, because Winco is employee owned, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And
but that's a big company. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've been around.
Didn't they get bought
Winco?
by Walmart?
I had not heard that. Did you have something over here? I thought you were trying to show me something. What is that? Oh, Andy brought up a great question, actually. And this has been pressing the Travis. What is his name? Travis Snyder? Schneider?
Yes.
What do you make of that? Because that guy's been. I've been just dying. Andy and I have been laughing
the mansion on the hill that's not built. So I have a lot of different opinions on that based on my personal knowledge of him, and also my working with the planning department on a daily basis at the title company and at the recorder's office. I think that he's a family man trying to do good by his family, and I don't necessarily think that all business is always proper. So I don't think
that was a very diplomatic answer.
Well, it's true. I don't know the facts. I don't. I haven't had a single conversation with him or anyone about that. Actually, you're the first person, Andy. Thanks a lot to bring it up. But I read that and I thought, wow, that some of those things surprised me, and some of those things, and having had articles written about me and accusations made about me, I'm very much leery
skeptical
to believe all of the things that are even in print nowadays. So I don't know all the facts, but I do believe that he is a good person who wants to do right by his family and has worked very hard for our community. I also know that business can go sideways sometimes.
Every time I read an article that he pops up in, I just start laughing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I got to reach out to that guy and try and get him on, because his story seems interesting, to say the least. What got me was he had that. It was a duplex or something. He filed a permit for a new roof and then just built a whole addition on top of it or something like that. And he's like, I thought that was, I think he said in the article, he was under the understanding that since he still did the new roof, that it was basically up to code and fine. It's an interesting situation where you have this guy, and he's an engineer, right? Or works for an engineering company, and is not familiar with the codes.
Well, okay. Do you know how many codes there are?
I would imagine a lot.
Yeah. So
but you would think a guy that does it for his living would be a little more well-versed.
How many people does he have with him? And there's a team for all of these things. It's not just, and different teams for each one. There are different things. When you run a business, your thumb's not on every single thing. So I can't take that as, and he's taking all the responsibility, which is actually admirable in my opinion.
Is he though?
For that?
I didn't think he took responsibility.
I mean, he's saying, well, I guess he's trying to go around it, but he's not denying that he was part of that. So
he's not denying, but I don't know if taking responsibility would be the words that I would use. He kind of seems to play, and that's why it would almost be more interesting to talk with him, because he seems to be playing the role of, oh, well, I didn't really know. I didn't understand the code. Oh, I thought it worked this way. And that could be extremely genuine, because you're right, there are a ton of codes. But it could also be a kind of a cop-out.
So let's talk about the road code. The road. I was born and raised on a cattle ranch. My father logged quite a bit, and so I built roads myself on our land, and they were temporary for logging purposes. And I'm like, sometimes those roads do become permanent, but then you grade them and you make them proper. So I don't know about all of those. Like the road part of that was very interesting to me, that article. And like I said, I haven't talked to him. I don't know any of it. But you build a road to get to some place, and then you continue using that road instead of making a new road. That's it transitions. Everything is fluid. That's what I learned during COVID. Everything is fluid.
I
Keep on
think
moving.
he's in a bit of a shit show. Either way, I think the road it went through marshland was the big
Yeah, but
complaint.
I don't know where the location is. I'm like, how do you go through a marshland when you're on a hill?
Well, I think in front of him it's all marsh down below. We gotta get him
I'm
on.
super
Maybe I
curious.
know.
I haven't
Well,
looked
it's
at a
just
map. I
it's
don't know.
fascinating how it's unfolding and his position and all of it. Where he's
So I've only read the one article. I don't know that anything
oh, there's a
has.
lot.
There's a lot more.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I haven't kept up on it.
Do you feel jaded at all with the news or with representation in that print media where you have been attacked? I mean, you two are kind of interesting in that same way where you guys are.
I don't feel attacked necessarily by the media. I feel attacked by the public, and them trying to goat me into becoming angry, I guess. And I don't know if they want what they expect from that. And so, not knowing how to appease them is difficult. It's very difficult. I don't feel jaded by the media so much, personally.
You think it's the public driving that?
I think that there are some people who have agendas, and they're trying to instill or produce a response from me that is going to harm me, and I'm very careful. I try to be very careful. It's hard.
Not saying the wrong thing.
Well, and not getting mad, and not taking it too personally. You don't if they don't know me, then come have a conversation with me. Have a real conversation instead of blasting me on social media or whatever you're doing.
Do you get a lot of hate online?
Not necessarily like on my social media. I've had some people trying to bait me, I guess that's the right word, into a conflict, and more than I anticipated, for sure. I'm not that kind of person who feeds into that, and I was surprised how many people want that.
You're not the type of person to engage in that kind of rhetoric.
I'm a mom. My kids are all adopted. I had to go through like screenings and trainings and all of this process to become stable. And I taught the grief and loss and the discipline classes for foster parents, and I learned a lot having conversations with the public about their discipline and how they plan to discipline and all of their losses that they've had. And I've gotten a lot of compassion from that and understanding. I know you're coming from a different place than me, so we're gonna have. If you want to have a real conversation, let's do that. But if you just want to goat me into getting angry, I'm gonna refrain.
One of the things that I had heard in preparation for this one particularly is that a lot of people had felt that you kind of attack Juan when you have the spotlight on you.
I don't feel that I attack him. I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that I have ever tried to point that out, because I've been told that I don't attack enough.
Oh, really?
Yes, that I don't have anything to contribute, that I don't engage enough. So in our last Keat event, I did state his facts about his
The
3
League of
years.
Women Voters.
Mhm,
I think that
mhm.
was in reference when people were telling me that was
Yeah.
to that.
That was one time, and I did. I tried to engage because I was told that I needed to do so, and I stated facts. This is what the facts that I know about him, and these are my facts. It wasn't about bashing him, but we are in a competition, and I am the most experienced. Period.
Has it been hard trying to get that message out for you?
No, luckily I do have a lot of history here, a lot of family and friends and community members that I've helped in the past. So if they know me and they've had conversations with me, then they pretty much know where I'm coming from. There's a few real estate agents that I'm surprised or that I've had conversations with, that I've helped and I've dealt with, and they aren't supporting my campaign, and I want to have conversations with them, but that, they we all have choices. We all make our own choices for ourselves, and it was an eye opener for me.
Just seeing which which side people landed on.
Hmm.
They were close to you.
I'm not close, not close. Just professional history, and the professional history being in the property records and at the recorder's office and those kinds of things, and then they're supporting the person who I'm running against who doesn't know anything about those things. So that confused me. I don't know where, if your profession relies on my office, the office that I know a lot about, then why would you support somebody who doesn't know that office?
The qualification, that seems to be a big tier of your campaign as well. I noticed on your website you have that little breakdown of your
Yeah,
qualifications,
my little
and then
chart.
you have other, and
Yeah,
it's just one check mark for one.
yeah, because that's why I'm running, and that's the platform I'm running on. That the
His
recorder's office
qualification.
has, yeah, that the recorder's office matters. If you've ever walked through a door, do you know who owns the property is under your feet? How many times a year do you vote? Once, maybe twice, maybe twice. How many times do you walk in the door to your house? 365, probably times two, at least. How many times do you think about who owns that property? How many times do you think about, if you don't own it and somebody else owns it, do you need to know who owns it? Because it could be a corporation. You might go through a professional property management kind of deal. You might need to know that. That's kind of information. Your house matters. Where you live, where you sleep matters. So I don't understand those who don't care about that. It's a different kind of concept for me.
Do you attribute that lack of caring in reference to people who are supporting Juan's campaign, where you do feel like you were the more qualified candidate?
I feel like I'm the more qualified candidate for the elected position. The clerk recorder is an elected position. The registrar of voters is a function under the clerk. He tried to fight me on that in the beginning as well, and the registrar of voters is not an elected position. That's period, point blank. Check it out in the statutes. The state says so. So it is not a separate electable position.
But that idea of trying to get out this idea that you are more qualified, that seems to have hit a brick wall in some regards, right? You got
Well,
censored in it was your candidacy statement, right, where the judge censored it or wanted you
oh
to
no no
change
no
it.
no the judge no. So I said I am the only. The word "only" was the only issue that they could bring up. I'm the only candidate with experience in both offices. That was my
That
candidate
was your
statement.
statement.
That was a period, a sentence in my candidate statement. Kelly, as the elected official, was going to strike the entire sentence, and I could have said, okay. Instead, I said, what do I do instead of that? How do I just change it? Because it was past the deadline, and of course, it's past the deadline when somebody else can look at it and contest it. And she said, this is what you do. You do a writ. And so this is directed by Kelly, and another thing that takes time because I can't talk to her about the election during business hours. So I had to email her after hours, and then she had to email me, and then I couldn't respond until after hours again. So it takes time. All of this time is communication that is just lacking, in my opinion, and very difficult. And I didn't know how to file a writ. So I contacted a couple of attorneys that I know, and somebody took it. Somebody said, here, I'll do this for you. And so he did. And it was not about suing my boss. It was not about suing the county. It was about changing a word in a sentence. And that was it, period. And Kelly and I were fine. Everything is fine. It became drama because people like to make drama. It's not drama. It's just factual and how you handle the process. And my attorney did locate a lot of evidence, and he said I could have fought it and kept the word in. And I chose not to fight it. I just wanted to change it.
Well, that was what I had read in reference to that article, was that there seemed to be a lot of candidates throughout the nation that use that phrase,
Mm-hmm.
I am the only candidate
Mm-hmm.
who blank.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you were targeted with that?
I believe that my opponent's camp targeted that to remove it, the entire sentence. And I think that I could have laid down and said, okay. And I choose not to.
And so what did you change it to? You just got rid of
I am a
only.
candidate. Only a.
I'm a candidate that has
Experience both
experience.
offices. Hmm. It's that simple and that minute. And I did feel attacked by his camp and his, but that's part of the process. That's how it works. And I'm learning all of these things.
Some of those seem like hard lessons to have to go through though, on the fly.
It was a bit stressful, but a learning experience.
The process of running for office. I don't envy that.
I didn't, like I said, I had no idea how.
What you were getting into.
Hmm. 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 I'm not my political history is none. I've been on boards and things like that, but I've never had to campaign for myself. I've never had to put myself out there for the public.
Has
It's
that's been stepping into the public is not as great as people think it will be.
Well, and I've spoken, like I said, I was in marketing. I don't mind that, but that's all knowledge that I have already. And I was raised in 4-H and FFA, and talking in front of people is not as big a deal as uh, some people feel. My mom's terrified of it, but she was a teacher. I'm like, really, Mom? You get in front of
You're
people,
talking it, yeah, you're doing it
teenagers
every day.
every day, and she's like, no, I could never do that. I'm like, you do. You just don't know you do, because it's the thing you're comfortable with. That when you get to a point where you're like, oh, I don't really know that answer, that's when you become uncomfortable.
Walk me through the email correspondence where Juan reached out. I think it was a Lost Coast thing. You had sent an email out
Oh, okay. Okay.
referencing the
So the history.
positions.
The history.
Set the stage for that.
Okay. So my email was prior to the. I think it was prior to. Well, I know it was in the primary, but I think it was shortly after the mail-in ballots for the primary had come out, and I sent an email to the list because I purchased the list from the elections office, and anybody with an email on there could be emailed. So I sent an email stating that, sorry, it's been a long time since I reviewed this, sorry, the history of the clerk recorder's office and how in 98, the state took away the 5 clerk functions from the court operations, and court operations was created, and the county clerk and recorder were merged because there's only a minimal amount of
I think that was in
duties.
96. They were merged.
96, 96.
Yeah.
Yeah. The courts. Okay, that makes sense. So I was a senior in high school that year. So, but I was here, so I'm like, oh, I'm the year. So then the clerk became the clerk recorder, and those clerk functions include CEQA filings and notary bonds, and like there's only 5 or 6 functions of that. And then later in 07 or 08, then the person who was the county clerk at that time retained the registrar of voters. He retained it because he had it, because he really didn't have a different position, because he didn't work for the courts and he didn't work for Carolyn, who was the clerk recorder, and so he was his own position. I don't even know if he remained in. I mean, he had to have remained an elected official. You can't take that away. But then, as time went by, the registrar of voters was transitioned to Carolyn, and they were in the basement at the time at the planning department, and that was lots of conversations that we had, and mold and mildew and all of these atrocious things. And so my point was that the registrar of voters, the point of the email was the registrar of voters is not an elected position. The clerk recorder is. And so that became a big fight, and he called me a liar basically on that. And he didn't know the history. And he claimed he said that even in your interview that he didn't know the history because he wasn't here, and that so there was some banter about that, not between the two of us, just in the emails and things, and accusations that I was a liar. And I'm sorry, if you don't know the history, it doesn't mean I'm a liar. I was stating the history. Certainly, it would be handled differently, and it wouldn't be assigned by the Board of Supervisors. It was a transition time, and it had to be assigned because she couldn't be elected into that adding that to the title at the time because there was an election happening. So that was my entire point, and his camp blew that out of proportion.
Well, it seemed like in the email you were making the argument that only one of those positions was the elected official, and I think it was the recorder.
I
or
never.
the clerk.
I didn't imply. I didn't mean that. If that's how it read. Um,
I think because I think that was his big hang up
was that the clerk
was that
was
he
elected?
well, it seemed like that was your interpretation, was that, or what was presented in that way was that you felt one of those positions was elected, the other two were board approved. I think that
They
was the
were
big hang
merged
up.
with it. So the transition between them, as they transitioned, they were done by the board. So the board,
The merging of the two, the merging
right,
of the clerk
that
and the
happened.
recorder.
Yeah, and then they became elected, part of the elected title. And I don't know when that all happened, when the registrar of voters became part of the title. And I couldn't find any history on that in different counties, because I've done some research, and different counties do have it in a different way. But my point for my email was purely that the registrar of voters was not an elected position on its own.
And that it was a function of the
A
clerk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody was arguing with that. I think that's pretty well.
I didn't read his email more than twice, so
Yeah. I think because that was a big hang up in a lot of what I ran through, is that it seemed like it was a bash on one of you two, was that, okay, who actually knows what the position is really about, and
and that's what it became an issue between who's
who knew what.
Yeah.
Do you mind? I actually have a quote from the email. Do you mind if I read that?
From his or from mine?
From yours.
Okay.
From what it was stating. Quote, a little history about the position. The elected official is the recorder. The clerk and registrar of voters have been appointed by the Board of Supervisors. The recorder is the department head over the clerk and registrar of voters. This is why it is so important that the next recorder has experience recording. And that was pulled from Lost Coast out of your email.
I've been corrected.
In that, okay. Because I just wanted to clear that up, because in that it seems pretty hard pressed.
So
the distinction between the two.
So it is, and when you quote it back, that sounds very hard. So my point was that the recorder was in the position, and then the clerk got added to it, and then the registrar of voters was added later. So I guess it's very worded wrong, but my understanding was, my point was that the registrar of voters was not an elected position.
Okay. Because in reading that, it gets a little. Right. When you hear that, it gets a little. That's why I had to ask, is because I wasn't quite sure. It gets a little dicey in there.
Yes.
And I was a little hesitant in my understanding of that, because I don't know anything about this. I'm bringing you guys on to try to fill me in so I can make an informed.
Right.
Just
absolutely.
like I hope people listening can make informed.
That's the goal.
But
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so you hear these two people running, and they're arguing over the details of the position, and I'm over here thinking, what is happening right now?
Well, and that's the transition had happened in the history, and my point was the history had morphed it.
Yeah.
So
which doesn't, it's hard.
That wasn't explained. That isn't explained properly.
That sounds different than.
I could have worded it differently, and that is truly what my intent, that they were combined, added in. Yeah.
I don't think anybody is arguing that point. I think Juan was arguing the idea that it's appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
But he's wrong that it was at that time done, and then it became a merge of the elected officials. So the registrar of voters was appointed to the clerk.
I thought that had always been a function of the clerk.
So when they separated them so this is what Carolyn Cernich told me. I had lunch with her, I had a conversation with her, and I got a lot of my information from her. The way that I worded a lot of these things are from her.
Carolyn set you up.
Yes. So, and then I've done a lot of research since then. I've talked to a few board of supervisors. Obviously, none of them were here at that time. So everything it's transitioned. I mean, it's been 20-something years, almost 30 years. So when the court became a function of the state, the clerk position was an elected position who oversaw the courts and those 5 functions of the clerk, and had, I guess, the registrar of voters under him. When the state took over the courts and the clerk functions, the 5 clerk functions went to Carolyn, she was appointed, because it wasn't an elected time at that time, she was appointed the clerk of those things. And then the registrar of voters, and I think that person I want to say his name was Lindsay. I think he had a few other tasks that he retained from when he was the county clerk. Because he wasn't an elected official, he had to maintain some job duties. And then when he was no longer being the registrar of voters, then at that time the board of supervisors, because it was between elections, it wasn't an elected position at the time, it was appointed back to the clerk functions. It was not held with that clerk function, the county clerk function, during those 7 or 8 years. Does that make sense?
No, can you walk me through that one more time?
So the registrar of voters was
It
not held with the clerk when the clerk functions went, the county clerk functions went with the recorder. Somebody else held the manager position of that.
So the registrar of voters was a separate position
And
entirely.
he had other jobs, yeah. And he had other jobs, but he was an elected official, so they couldn't take everything away from him.
My understanding was that the registrar has always been a function of the clerk.
So that's what I'm saying. It's not. It wasn't. It was an appointed back to the clerk, because it could be under any elected official.
Not just the clerk.
If you read the statutes.
Huh.
And in different counties, they do it differently. So I wouldn't say with the assessor. That's what I've done a lot of research on the different counties, because this is an issue. But it can be appointed. It can be associated with other parts, other elected officials.
Okay. I had not heard that. I was under the assumption. Andy, can you see if you can find that? Just to, because I want to get all this right,
Absolutely.
100%.
And I don't believe that it actually has to be an elected position, elected official who has
the registrar of voters.
I know that some counties have just a manager for that, an elected, non-elected position.
But entirely separate from the clerk and the recorder. Okay. I had not heard that. I was under the impression that it was always a sub-function of the clerk, and that in 96 the board simply merged the clerk and recorder position.
Right. So from my understanding, it was not.
It was a separate thing.
100%. But the Humboldt history is different than that.
Yeah. Well, I know that in the county it gets a little difficult because supposedly Humboldt County does a lot of things
their own way.
Yeah.
Or at that time, was there a rule in place? Who knows? You know, I mean, they were literally in a basement. So it wasn't such a big drama at that time. So yeah, different counties can do different things.
When I made that comment about Carolyn setting you up, you seem to kind of hit that. Do you feel like she has done that?
I really don't know. It's sad, honestly, that I feel hurt by some of her actions, yes.
In reference to how you ran your campaign? Or how she helped provide guidance in that?
No, that I feel like she told me untruths. Because we had sat down and had lunch, and she told me that she wasn't going to back anyone, and that she and her husband were going to contribute to my campaign, but under the table, under the radar, and those things didn't happen.
Is she backing one?
Recently.
How recently?
I'd say a month, maybe a little longer.
So that was a bit of a surprise.
A slap in the face, really.
That's probably a better way to put it than surprise.
Having worked with her for 20-something years and known her for a long time.
Why do you think she did that?
I can't speculate. I really can't. I have no idea.
Is that who you got a lot of the information from regarding
some of it? And then
positions?
I've talked to other board of supervisors. I've done some of my own research, my public records requests, things like that, to get the other research that I've done. And then, of course, they've done some research on the other state or counties in the state.
Yeah. It's interesting. So she said she was going to support you under the radar. That's kind of a red flag.
Well, because there were 3 of us running, and she was good friends with 2 of us.
So she wanted to remain impartial.
And then the one that she wasn't friends with is who she backed.
Slap in the face.
Yep.
you find anything on that, Andy?
Not
Nothing
for
on the
Humble.
registrar.
Not for Humble specifically.
Um, yeah, I wanted to clear that up because when I asked Juan that same question about the emails, because again, from an outside perspective, I'm reading this, and I don't know if I'm a little jaded towards articles. I think in a certain way because you talk
The
to,
media.
yeah, you talk to the actual people, and the stories come out a little
Mhm,
differently. So I
mhm,
wanted to get your
mhm,
perspective
mhm,
because if it's important that the people know who has a say in which
mhm,
aspect
mhm,
of the political campaign, right?
mhm.
And so if they're under the impression that one position is appointed versus it being
Well,
up
and
to the
I'm not
voters.
stating it's appointed any longer. I'm stating that it was appointed at that time, that it transitioned to that back to the
No,
clerk.
but in reference to the confusion in your email.
Absolutely, I can
Yeah.
understand the confusion, understandably, but certainly not my intent to make that confusion
Yeah.
misworded for sure.
I think that's Juan touched on that as well. He
Mhm.
said that he didn't want to assume your intent. He didn't think that you were purposely trying to
Mm-mm.
sway people into believing
No,
one
no,
thing or
I was
another.
I was honestly trying to give a history lesson.
Kind of backfired.
It did. Well, it's still part of the history.
Yeah, that aspect
hmm
of the registrars,
hmm
if that stands. Nothing on
So
that.
in '08, the stuff's not available online. You literally have to go into the archives.
Oh, to see
Mm-hmm.
that breakdown. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well then we're not gonna find that.
Yeah, I mean, and
Oh,
it's a history. I mean, it's sorry.
no worries. We can wrap this up, Tiffany. I really appreciate you
Thank you,
taking the
Nick, for
time to come and
having me.
talk with me.
I really like your picture behind you.
Thank
Very
you.
nice.
Yeah,
Very
Johnny
nice.
Cash. Are you a
Yes,
fan?
a Man in Black. Of
Okay,
course
there
I
you go.
am.
Um,
I was raised on country, so
yeah, I know he's kind of back there. He's my support network
yeah,
back
he's
there.
watching you though.
Yeah,
Like
he's
he's
like
got.
Nick, stay on the path. Do you want to plug where people can find you, where they can find
Oh,
your campaign?
thank you. So I do have a website, elect Tiffany Hunt Nielsen, NIELSEN.com. And I do have a Facebook page under the same and Instagram. I do have Twitter, but I'm very bad at it and don't do it very often. And then, of course, I have a P.O. Box 303 in Eureka. 95502 is the mailing address. And then my campaign cell phone is 707 601 7477.
You were brave putting out your that is that your real cell phone?
No, that's
Okay,
my
I was gonna
campaign
say
phone.
that's
And
that
I
is
do have
brave.
some interesting people contacting me on it. But
Yeah.
I the other night we did a campaign group of us called some voters, and the response was actually amazing. I was really happy. But I used my campaign phone. And I suggested that all my friends push *67. So if you don't want calls back, but the response was good. So
Well, that's good.
yeah, it's kind of
Do you
fun.
have any parting word? Any last thing you would like to throw
No,
out
I
there?
appreciate you having me
Okay.
on.
Yeah,
And
thank you for taking the
I
time to
do
come do this.
hope that people do vote. That's the most important thing. It's not about who you vote for necessarily. I mean, it is vote for me, but it matters that you vote. It's a golden ticket. Your vote matters. It affects somebody's life, not just yours.
Well, it affects us all.
Absolutely.
It's your
Potentially.
voice. It's your voice. So use your voice.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well,